comes from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 22, verses 1 through 14. One more, Jesus spoke to them in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who gave a wedding banquet for his son. He sent his slaves to call those who had been invited to the wedding banquet, but they would not come. Again he sent other slaves, saying, 'Tell those who have been invited, look, I have prepared my dinner. My oxen, my fat calves have been slaughtered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding banquet.' But they made light of it and went away, one to his farm, another to his business, while the rest seized the slaves, mistreated them, and killed them. The king was enraged. He sent his troops to destroy those who murdered and burned their city. And then he said to his slaves, 'The wedding is ready, but those invited were not worthy. Go therefore into the main streets and invite everyone you find to the wedding banquet.' Those slaves went out into the streets and gathered all whom they found, both good and bad. So the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came to see the guests, he noticed a man there was not wearing a wedding robe. And he said to him, 'Friend, how did you get in here without a wedding robe?' And he was speechless. Then the king said to the attendants, 'Bind him hand and foot and throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen.'" God's story is our story.
Thanks be to God.
Well, we're back to it again. Back to the outer darkness and the weeping of gnashing of teeth. It's like Matthew just couldn't hold himself back. It was nice. Obviously, he read it once first and prepared himself to read the story. A few years ago, previous congregation, person got up to read that gospel lesson, and they were reading it out cold. They just had never seen it or hadn't really thought about it. And he was reading through it in front of the whole congregation, and he got to that one part, and he stopped, and he looked at everybody, and he said, "What? I can't read this. It's the story of a wedding." The story of a wedding feast. This is not the only. Luke has it too. But boy, howdy, is Luke different than this. But, as I've said before, let's take it seriously. And let's kind of step back and look at what's going on. It starts out fairly normally. A king's son is going to get married. And so he sends out invitations to people. But, well, you know, my favorite TV show is on tonight, and so I don't really know if I can come. Or the Cougars are playing basketball, and the Zags. Yeah, because if the Cougars were playing basketball, we'd probably want to do almost anything else except, sorry about that. Anyway, but the Zags are playing, and I can't miss anything that's going on with that, because it might be one of those moments. So the people find all kinds of excuses, and that's still fairly normal. But then the story takes a weird turn, like Jesus' parables often do. Because the king sends servants to some of the people, and some just flat out reject him, but others kill them. And you're going, whoa, what the heck? And then, here's where the story for us goes completely off the rails. Because what does the king do? Okay, stop all of the wedding preparations, because I am going to go with my troops and kill all those people, those nasty, and I'm going to burn down their town. And then the king comes back and says, okay, Anybody else find this story just flat out weird? Now we know weddings can go wrong. Linda has often said that I should really write a book. I'll wait till I'm, long since retired and kind of so that I can offend people and not have to worry about, but the things, how many people here, well, first of all, how many people here have been to a wedding? Never been to a wedding, Tyler? Ever? Oh, okay. Yeah, just kind of napping, that's all. But how many people here have been to a wedding where everything just went perfectly? And how many people here have gone to weddings where it's just a nightmare? Yeah. In fact, I was talking to Sherry beforehand, and she was looking at the gospel too, and she kind of went, wow, this is like Bridezilla. Wow, go burn that city. And then she looked at me, she said, actually, it's more like Groomzilla. But how many people have been to weddings where things really do kind of go wrong? It is all the weddings that I have done. And most of them are beautiful, but some of them, and when things go wrong at a wedding, it tends to really, really go wrong. I will never, ever forget. Previous congregation, oftentimes they asked us, they wanted their weddings to happen there because we had the longest aisle. I mean, the really important things, The longest aisle. And this was in the mid-90s when sheath dresses were in for bridesmaids. Do you guys remember those things? Well, the bride had chosen these dresses for the bridesmaids, and they were turquoise, kind of a turquoise electric green dress, and they were so tight, and they were tight like from the top all the way down to their knees. And what the bride hadn't even thought of was that these poor bridesmaids had to walk. They weren't just going to stand up there and look, and these things were tight, like I said, all the way down to the knees. So when these bridesmaids came walking out of the library and got to the head of the aisle, this is a sermon by visuals. These poor people were holding their bouquets and they were walking like this. And they had 120 feet of aisle to go down. And the first bride came walking down like this, and you could see her muttering under her breath, like, is this revenge? Revenge to make me look awful? It was great because the second was watching down at the far end, realized with horror what was going to be happening, and she just looked and she went, ripped the dress, and then proudly walked down the aisle. Every bridesmaid after her ripped the dress. That's some of the mildest stuff that we've had happen at weddings. I had groomsmen throw up over the rail. Great stuff. I had a bride, well, we have kids here. I won't get into that because it was a wardrobe malfunction that happened in front of 400 people. Yeah. So this wedding that we have in today's story may be a little bit extreme, but we're going to miss the point. The point for Matthew is that he was trying to explain to himself and to the people that he was talking to why world events were looking the way they did for them at that point. We'll miss the point completely if we don't understand that. 70 AD, and Jerusalem had just been burned by the Romans. All the people in Jerusalem had been killed. Matthew, who's Jewish, is looking at this and going, wow, why? It's because we just didn't accept God's invitation. So really, in many ways, it's kind of understandable if you look back at it that way, as to what he's trying to make sense of. It is kind of like Game of Thrones, isn't it? The Red Wedding. That's now the reference for any wedding that goes really bad is, whoa, this is just like the Red Wedding. Well, not quite as bad as the Red Wedding. But now you can kind of see where he's coming from, and you can see why Luke is going to be different. What I want us to do, though, is in the midst of all of these things that could distract us, in the midst of bridesmaids that can't walk, in the midst of wardrobe malfunctions, in the midst of burning the city, what's the point that we can take away from all of this? And for me, the point comes back to the fact that we are invited. We're invited. And actually, that's something that can be somewhat problematic for us. Because an invitation means that you have a choice. You can choose to be part of it, or you can choose not to. We have a king, we have a God that we in many times have declared to be the Almighty, the All-Sovereign. But there are problems that happen when you start to do that. Because then where's our choice in all of this? The Calvinists, the Presbyterians, the Dutch Reformed, some of the other, have kind of worked this thing out by saying, what is it, Kirk? You're predestined. Kirk chose not to be here. They've worked it out by saying that we are predestined from the beginning of time as to whether we will be in the kingdom or not. So that keeps God's sovereignty together. But I think that God chooses out of love to make it an invite. An invitation, pure and simple, reaching out to all people, respecting us as people, respecting us as God's children, and saying, I respect you enough that you can say yes or you could say no if you wanted to. An invitation goes out to a party. God is saying, the party just wouldn't be the same if you're not there. I really want you to be a part of this, but I'm not going to make you. I don't want you to be part of the party if you're coming in here because you're afraid. If you're afraid of punishment, then it's not a party. I don't necessarily even want you to come in here because you think you're going to get a prize or a sticker, because then it's not really a party either. It's just a grab. I want you to be part of this party because of love. Because you love me, says God, and you love each other, and you simply want to be together. The invitation is going out